Welcome to Education Today. I'm Connor Huff of Katanning High School and the Armstrong School District. Here at Education Today, we try to bring our viewers at home a well-rounded series of shows that highlight the various initiatives and activities that our students and teachers are involved in, as well as highlight various happenings and traditions from different areas of our district communities. Tonight we are going to highlight a project that is in the works that will help brighten up the Ford City community. A project on the Rails to Trails segments in Ford City is in the works, and we've brought in a few guests who are very much involved in the community, as well as one of ASD's own teachers as well. To give us some insight on what to expect from this project, welcome to Education Today. So, would all of you please introduce yourselves and your roles in the district and community?
I'm Stacy Kluken, and I'm a teacher at Ford City High School. I teach physical education. I'm involved with the Parks and Recreation as well as the Shade Tree Commission.
My name's Dave Rupert. I'm the manager of the Armstrong Conservation District, and I'm a volunteer board member of the Allegheny Valley Land Trust that owns and operates the Rails to Trails project.
And my name is Ron Steffi, and I'm the executive director of the Allegheny Valley Land Trust.
All right, as a member of the Parks and Recreation of Ford City as well as the Shade Tree Commission, can you give us some insight as to what all the group does?
Well, at Ford City, we plan many activities along the trail as well as our parks. We have a food program that we have during the summer that takes care of all of our 5 parks except the main downtown park in Ford City. There's weddings at Ford City's parks. There's the Heritage Days in the past has been at the parks, and there's other activities that go along in the park. So we try to blend and work with the Parks and Rec and the Shade Tree Commission. That's why I joined the Shade Tree Commission. And we are deciding and implementing new programs since we've had the sewage project, and we're going to put more effort into having more green space, or it's called urban forestry or urban forestry, you know, that we're bringing the trees and planting them more into our towns and communities. So we're trying to work with the Parks and Recs as well as the Shade Tree Commission and implement those programs, and maybe even more. There's bicycle programs and trail programs. There's been reading programs we've had with our Fort City Borough. So we've done a lot with the Parks and Recs, and Shade Tree Commission is just bringing about new people on our program, and it's just being redeveloped again in our community.
It's very nice. For those who may not know, what exactly is a trail and how did it come to be?
Ron, would you like to answer that one?
Sure, I'll give an attempt. The Armstrong Trail is a former railroad corridor that became inactive. Allegheny Valley Land Trust purchased it in 1992. At that time it was 52 miles long. Since then, part of the railroad south of Ford City and Ralston has been returned to railroad service, and the trail is now 36 miles long. In Ford City had the trail conveyed to it from the Allegheny Valley Land Trust, so Ford City actually owns the Ford City section. The rest is owned by the Allegheny Valley Land Trust, and it extends from Crooked Creek clear up to and past East Brady area. The distance of that is about 29 miles. Of that, 28 miles of the 29 miles is completed limestone surface that people can use for non-motorized uses such as walking, hiking, running, bicycling, and bird watching, and many other activities.
When was the trail purchased from Conrail?
It was purchased in 1992.
What exactly is the Fit and Wellness Trail?
The Fit Trail was a program started because Dr. Alexak was a person that decided, I'm a phys ed teacher. He heard how much we don't have equipment and we didn't have a weight room and things. So we decided to figure out something for these kids from our high school to do something else extra on the trail with chin-up bars and sit-up stations. So it's a 20-station area, Now, Dr. Alexak went after a grant called the Armstrong County Recreational Authority grant through up at the Belmont Complex, and we have gotten a $4,000 or $5,000 grant many years ago, and probably about 5 or 6, and then we put in about 380 volunteer hours to complete that fit trail, and then we had people donate funding with I think the Armstrong County Hospital matched that $4,000 grant. So we ended up getting about $10,000 total to create that fit trail and 380 volunteer hours. And it was exciting because I, as a teacher at Fort City, can use that fit trail, and we're going to try to possibly model that throughout all the other communities in the future. That's like another idea that we're going to try to blend in and see if the other communities would like to follow suit. Lots of people use it. It's exciting. I have my students work on that trail. They work different areas of their bodies, and there's just 20 of the stations. We get about 12 or 13 stations in with our students at Fort City High School. So it's well worth the $10,000.
It's a lot of investments.
Yes.
What are the aesthetic benefits of the trail?
Dave, you can answer that one. How about that? You bike a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say I bike a lot on the trail, and I usually try and bike from my house in Ford City up to East Brady and back. I just love the rich history of the valley. As you go up north of like Cowanshannock Creek, there's the old Monticello furnace. You get up by Templeton, you have the old refractory up there. Get up nearer East Brady, you've got an old coaling tower. You have the Phillipston Industrial Yard where they used to turn engines around. There's a roundabout up there. So there's a lot of really nice historical features that I like whenever I ride the trail. Plus, you have a tremendous opportunity to see wildlife there. I mean, I've seen turkey, deer, I've seen bear. I've never seen a rattlesnake on the trail or a copperhead, but you know, people tell me that they've seen them there. And one of the nice things is if you're riding your bike, you stop, especially up near Templeton or Reimer, you stand a good chance of seeing a bald eagle. You know, so yeah, those are some of the aesthetics that I like along the trail.
So why are some of the sections paved and others have crushed stone for their surface?
Ron, that's better for you.
In Ford City and Katanning is where it's a pavement, and the decision was made by both council members of Ford City and Katanning to have it paved, and that allows for the use in town with baby carriages, strollers, things such as that, inline skating, where you have it inside the town where it's going to be used a lot more. As we go out into the more rural areas, we go with crushed limestone. And the reason for that is it's much easier to maintain, it's much cheaper to put down initially, and you don't get the use on there, but you have a lot of trees and other things, and trees have roots. And in the rural areas, we just feel that having a crushed limestone that's a firm surface does a much better job instead of having the waves from the roots and other things. That it provides what's needed. So in the towns, we're just providing so that it can be used much easier for a lot of different modes of transportation with the buggies, the inline skating. Once you get away from those areas, we feel that it's mostly hiking and biking. And one of the things that I like about the limestone is it stays much cooler in the summertime instead of having the heat radiate up from you, while you do have the limestone that doesn't reflect as much as the heat.
Smart move. Is there a group that organizes events on this trail?
Yes, along within town, that the boroughs, people in the boroughs quite often have events. The YMCA has different events that they have a half marathon and they have some 5Ks on there. And there's also the Armstrong Rails to Trails Association, which is an all-volunteer organization that has the Eat, Play, Ride that's coming up in middle of May. and they're trying to have other events. For a long time, we only had sections of the trail completed. The last couple years, we improved over 15 miles of the trail. So now that we have most of the trail completed from Ford City the whole way to East Brady, why that allows to have more events along the trail, and looking forward to having walks to point out the things like Dave was talking about with historic walks. We do a walk in the spring with the wildflowers, and as more and more eagles, you can see two nests, bald eagles nests from the trail, and as people become more in tune to seeing the birds and other things, well, I think we'll have even more events along the trail.
And I know we've also had a couple Healthy Armstrong events where the students are encouraged to come, and there's been a lot of participants that way. Lenape Elementary had used the trail for their physical activity after school programs. I knew they had run those in the past. And our library at Fort City's library, had a really interesting program where they put their reading books on 8 by 11.5 sheets of paper, and they'd have the students read and then walk or run to the next page.
That's nice.
So that was a neat program. That started, I think, last year. So we hope to encourage them, once the weather breaks here in this great, wonderful winter we're having, that we get those kids back out on the trail and start them reading and moving to their stations for their reading stations. So that was an exciting thing Fort City Library had done too. So Armstrong, Healthy Armstrong, you know, the Rails to Trails, the YMCA, everybody encompasses. And I think even the Fort City, there's a group in Fort City that had some kind of bike activity where they did a bike race and such. And I don't know if it was the Fort City Borough or another group organized something with the bikes on the trail too. There was some kind of bike race. So we have many things going on in our towns.
Another event, and although people may not think it as an event, is work days that the Armstrong Rails to Trails have, where they pick up garbage along the trail. They may do some pruning. They may put up, right now they have developed some historic signs and putting up historic signs. So that's a place to go to on the ArmstrongRailstoTrails.org, I believe is their website. And you can see when they're having work days, and quite often along with the work days that they'll do walks along the trail and explain what's in the area to people
That are helping out.
Yeah, the other thing that you will see is there's an awful lot of people that just, I'll say, socialize along the trail. There's a group of like 6 or 8 older gentlemen
Oh, the
that
senior men, yes.
ride the trail a lot. They'll dress up in their nice bright colors, and
They always wear their helmets too.
yeah, they do. They always wear their helmets. They go out, they ride together. They'll stop and have coffee along the trail, and then they go for breakfast after they're all done with their rides. And you know, that's starting to, I'm going to say, take off. We're seeing more and more groups like that of people just going out and using it as a socialization experience, but also, you know, they're getting physically fit by doing that.
And that's a great tool for me, because when they come back, if there's a problem, they're quick to call
Quick
or
feedback.
contact me somehow. Yes, where
Yes,
there's
they do
problems.
about 25 to 30 miles, because I talk to them when I take my students out on the trail, and these gentlemen are just awesome. They're seniors, and they have their coffee break, and they always welcome, and nice to see the girls are out on their bikes, and we see them out on their bikes. And that's another thing with teaching, that they can see that these older people, they're doing something. They're not just hanging out watching television at home. So it was exciting to see the gentleman there. Also, isn't geocaching?
Yes.
We have some geocaching also on the trails. So it's neat. We have a lot of things going on.
I actually didn't know about the bald eagles. That's really neat. I didn't know you could see them from the trail.
Yes. They're working on their nests right now. They'll probably be laying eggs in within a month or month and a half, and then you don't see the young ones until mostly around June. You'll start to see them. But last year I was able to see 2 immature eagles. They were learning how to fly, and the flying part, they did okay, but they weren't as efficient as their parents. But to see them land, they have lots of problems landing, and they'll mostly, quite often, land on a dead tree, because there's not the leaves and everything, and they can sort of focus on that, and they still have problems. And even though they're as big as their parents, they'll cry out loud, and quite often that's when you can see one of the parents will come and somewhat try to guide them along. But it's very interesting to watch them.
Does this trail link up with any other trails?
This trail actually links up with the Red Bank Trail, and the Red Bank Trail is another acquisition of the Allegheny Valley Land Trust. Has that been, what, 5 years now since we bought it?
4 years. In 2010 is when we purchased it.
Yeah, so conceivably you can, get on your bike at Roston, you can either ride to East Brady, or you can, once you cross Red Bank Creek and get into Clarion County, you can turn to the right and you can ride all the way to Brookville. So it's roughly 41 miles from the river, where Red Bank Creek comes into the Allegheny River, up to Brookville. So if you wanted to and you felt like doing it, you could ride probably close, if you did a round trip, about 130, maybe 140 miles in a day. And there's a group of people that are called century riders. They typically try and ride 100 miles in a day. And one of the things that they do is they'll ride on the longest day of the year, June 20th, June 21st, during that summer equinox period. And they get an early start, they'll put their 100 miles in, and it's an event that I'm going to say we're going to start doing on the Armstrong/Red Bank Trail probably in a couple of years, whenever we get all the development done on it.
It's insane, 100 miles.
Yeah.
And there are also plans to for the Erie. There's a Erie to Pittsburgh Trail Alliance that to connect all the trails from the point at Pittsburgh to Lake Erie. And right now, about 60% of that trail is completed, but there's breaks in it. And on the Armstrong Trail, there's a break to the north and a break to the south. But I'm the vice president of the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail Alliance, and that's one of the things that we are working on, to not only take care of our own trails, but how can we find links to make these trails so that we can link from Lake Erie to Pittsburgh. Once you're to Pittsburgh, then you can use a Great Allegheny Passage and go the whole way to Maryland. And at Maryland, you can get on the C&O Canal Towpath and go the whole way to Washington, D.C. So in your lifetime, you're going to be able to go from this area right here the whole way to Washington, D.C. by trail.
There was a group of 6 of us that did that last year. We started in Washington, D.C., and then ended up in Pittsburgh, 355 miles in 5 days.
How was that?
It was a blast, And this year, the same group of people, we're going to go up and do the Pine Creek Trail up in the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania. So it's one where, there's a group of us that enjoy riding together, and we try to get out and, get out on some of the longer trails. And that's what Erie to Pittsburgh is going to be. Like Ron said, it's going to be one of those longer trails, or they're called mega trails. Whenever you put the Armstrong Trail and the Red Bank Valley Trail together, you can conceivably ride over 100 miles. That's a mega trail. So, we're blessed in Armstrong, Clarion, and Jefferson County to have a mega trail right here.
So how would you define rail banking?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah.
I don't know this part.
Rail banking is taking a railroad corridor that's inactive, and they call it, I don't want to say preserving, but it is in fact preserving that corridor for future railroad or transportation uses. And the concept is one that, if you look at the history of the railroads in this country, back in the 1920s or 1930s, there was probably 175, 180,000 miles of railroads in the United States. With the advent of the interstate highway system, railroads shrank and shrank and shrank, and to the point where I think we're at like 20% of what we were at our peak back then. And Congress, in their infinite wisdom back in the early 1980s, said, hey, wait a minute, we're losing our infrastructure here. And this is something that we recognize is for the greater good of the nation. And even though we may not use it now, we feel that we will be using that infrastructure in the future. So that's whenever they passed the National Trail Systems Act and established the concept of rail banking. And in the Armstrong Trail, we did what was called a private rail banking in conjunction with the county of Armstrong, and then we ended up in a 16-and-a-half-year battle over litigation with adjacent landowner rights, et cetera. With the Red Bank Trail, we actually entered into a formal agreement with the railroad that was presented to the Surface Transportation Board, and then the Surface Transportation Board issued what's called a Notice of Interim Trail Use, which means that, and that's where rail banking comes in, it means that we and the Allegheny Valley Land Trust are going to stand in the same shoes as the railroad. We will agree to maintain the corridor, we will accept the responsibility for managing that corridor, we will accept the liability that comes with owning a railroad corridor like that. In the interim, we are going to develop an interim use recreational trail for the benefit of the communities and the citizens of the area, and also to promote some ecotourism. But at some future point, there probably is going to be a railroad or some other type of transportation use that's going to want to come back in and reoccupy that corridor, and we're going to at that point have to turn that corridor back over to a railroad or some transportation use like that. What Ron talked about earlier, the corridor south of the Crooked Creek, from there to Shenley. Kiski Junction Railroad, which services some Rosebud deep mines in the area, they decided that they needed and wanted that corridor for the efficient movement of coal out of the valley. And so they took the corridor back over, and now they have an active railroad there. With the development of the Marcellus shale industry in here, you're seeing large amounts of frac sand that has being brought into the area. That may be at some future point, needed to move that frac sand into areas closer to where the wells are being drilled. So the rail banking concept is something that I both support and have seen the benefits of it, and the benefits of having an interim trail use for those of us to use while we have a trail there. Mm-hmm. So that's rail banking in a nutshell.
And I think an important thing to add is that we, as Dave said, we stand in the shoes of the railroad, and we had to purchase this corridor much like another railroad would do, and then we convey it back when a railroad does need it, much like a railroad will buy another railroad corridor from someone else. So there is a purchase and there is a selling back, but we're able to use it for an interim trail until it's needed for a railroad or other transportation use.
Why are ATVs prohibited from this trail?
The trail is for non-motorized use, and there's several reasons for that. Perhaps the most important to me right now is with the bald eagles. I don't think we would have nests right next to the trails if we allowed ATVs. Another reason is the volunteers that we have that do a great amount of work on both the Armstrong Trail and the Red Bank Valley Trail. They're there because they want the walking and the hiking and the biking. So they're the ones that are coming there and putting it together, and they strongly believe, and we agree with them, that you could not have the ATVs with the bicyclists and the hikers because it just changes.
Too disruptive.
Right. So it's more of a self activity where you're supplying the power for it, and we still have some problems with ATVs, not like it used to be. But we also have trouble with adjacent landowners with the ATVs that illegally use our corridor to go through it, and then they go onto someone else's property, and we're the ones that people blame, well, why do you allow them on your property, and we don't. Another thing is with the insurance. Right now, we pay a good bit of insurance just to cover for the trail and our liability. If it was to go for ATVs, our insurance company said, well, they would probably raise our insurance by at least $50,000, and they would not be the ones that would do it because they felt that we would not have a way to police it since it's almost 100 miles long. How do you enforce anything along the trail that would be 100 miles long? So those different factors are the factors that we consider with non-motorized. Plus, when we purchased the Red Bank Valley Trail, the railroad itself would not negotiate with us until we agreed that it would be for non-motorized use, because they saw the benefits of a non-motorized use as compared to an ATV trail.
It gets back to the issue of compatibility. You know, can an ATV and a hiker / bicyclist coexist? Usually not. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, it gets back to some of the arguments about hunting. Some people, you know, want to observe wildlife, other people hunt, you know, etc. Some of those uses tend to be incompatible. Incompatibility with ATVs tends to be a major issue. The vast majority of the people that use the trail enjoy it for the peace and solitude that they can find when they're out there.
Because they're there for the nature.
They're there for the natural aspect
all
of
the loud
it.
ATVs and whatnot.
Yeah,
Would disrupt it.
And it's one that I don't know if you have ever been along Red Bank Creek or if you've been north of Templeton, etc. But whenever you go along Red Bank Creek, there's actually some sections of the Red Bank Creek Trail where you can go for 8-10 miles and you're not going to see another house. You're not going to see a town, etc. I mean, you can, if you want to, you know, go back 200 years or 250 years, the way it was when you know, the settlers first came into this area. You can kind of experience that along the Red Bank Creek. And, you know, it's one where you can see fishers, you can see otters up there, the bald eagles, etc. And, you know, it's a very relaxing, you know, natural, passive recreation experience. You know, same thing with the large sections of the Armstrong Trail once you get outside of town.
Okay, thanks very much. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with Armstrong School District's Education Today. Stick around.
Before I came to IUP, I had no idea what college would be like or what role I would play or where I'd be in the future. But when I came to IUP, everything changed. I met people who really made me feel like I belonged. I had great classes at a great nationally ranked university. Hi, my name is Megan Miller. I'm a fine arts major and this is my university.